Hi Fools, welcome to Market Checkup, the Motley Fool's healthcare-focused investing show. I'm David Williamson, joined as usual by Michael Douglas.
And we're not talking about Obamacare today.
We aren't, and we actually don't even have any winners or losers for you today. Not a whole lot of movement as far as big pops and drops, so it's really just a headline bonanza. We have quite a few, so let's dive into it, Michael. We have a day in court for Teva Pharmaceuticals. Now, Teva lost a patent lawsuit for their key branded drug Copaxone. It's a multiple sclerosis drug. It's responsible for about a fifth of their revenue, probably about 40% of their net income. So it doesn't really get much more important than that. But good news for Teva. It was announced that the United States Supreme Court would take a look at this patent infringement issue. Unfortunately, or interestingly enough, I wouldn't say unfortunately, maybe for the generic drug makers who are out there, the Supreme Court's term goes from October 2014 to July 2015. So the question is, will this push back that May 24th launch?
Right. Well, and the big question, I think, for Teva as well as for the other side, which is, I think, Novartis, Momenta, and Mylan, is basically, will Chief Justice Roberts grant Teva's motion for a stay, to basically stay that earlier appeals court ruling until this litigation has gone through? Chief Justice Roberts has heard Teva's appeal and is now asking the other side to respond. So we will know, hopefully fairly soon, which way they're going to go. I believe they have to respond by April 14th, so not too much time there.
Yeah, and I wonder, even without the stay, if just the fact that the Supreme Court will be looking at this will essentially be a stay in itself, because if the patent ruling goes against them and it gets pushed back to where it originally was in September 2015, these companies will have essentially had an at-risk launch, and they could be punitively damaged and have to pay Teva for any sales essentially that they generated before their patent expired.
Well, and at the same time, the longer this delay happens for Teva, the better news for them, right? Because if they,
money in the bank.
Well, and if they are able to convert more people over to the 3 times weekly formulation of Copaxone, then perhaps those people will not go over to generics. So this is really a good opportunity for Teva to preserve this revenue and this profit for a long time.
That's a great point. It's really a race against time for them, for being able to get that conversion to the better dosing of Copaxone versus the cheaper once daily generic version that'll be coming out. But on the generic side of things, it's so funny that this is sort of the box that Teva's in. They're actually just launching a generic drug as well. A generic version of Loveza. Right,
which is Amarin's blockbuster,
Amarin's competitor's blockbuster. It's Glaxo's drug.
Right, Glaxo's drug. I'm sorry, and it's just over $1 billion.
Yes.
So definitely will be interesting to see how much Teva is able to take off the top line there.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see too how this impacts Amarin stock. A lot of rabid investors out there. I think AstraZeneca may want to watch this as well. They invested in a company for a similar drug. Thera is the company, Epanova is the product. It's under FDA review. It hasn't been approved yet. AstraZeneca is thinking about pairing it up with Crestor, their statin, and hopefully getting an outsized effect on lipid or cholesterol benefit, overall cardiovascular outcome. Amarin's running a similar trial, but they don't actually have a big pharma partner, in the sense that with the statin, they did just get a marketing partner the other day, which was pretty exciting for the company. But it sort of remains to be seen what's happening there. But we will be following both stories here at Market Checkup, so stay tuned for follow-ups on both of them. All right, so moving on to our next story is we're staying in the courts, staying in the legal field, and it turns out we have big news coming out of Louisiana. It's a long-running court battle regarding the diabetes drug Actos. Now, it looks like the court of law agrees that Eli Lilly and Takeda didn't adequately disclose risks, and a jury verdict came back with a harsher penalty than I think anyone imagined: $9 billion, of which Takeda is responsible for 6 and Eli Lilly $3 billion.
Right. Well, and that's in addition to actual damages to the plaintiff, which was, I think, comparatively small change.
Yes.
Something like $1.5 million. And this is an interesting story because, of course, Actos has been on the market for a while.
Yep.
In fact, just a couple of years ago, went off patent, and so at this point, it represents about for the last 3 months of 2013, about 29.5 billion yen, which is about 290 million for Takeda. So we're talking about 2% of their top line. So,
Yeah.
So I think in terms of impacting drug sales for Takeda, this won't be very much. But really, the big news is that $6 billion that's going to cost them, and $3 billion for Lilly.
Yeah. Well, and I think the question is though, how much this actually ends up being for either of these companies. You take a look at these sort of big, outsized, punitive verdicts, and they tend to get appealed several times and whittled down over time, and there's a delay in paying. I think Exxon, with what they did with the Valdez spill, I think it was multiple decades before they paid, and just appeal after appeal after appeal until it got much less. Obviously it's a worse hit for Takeda than Eli Lilly. I think both will be fine. I think it's important for investors not to overreact. In fact, the judges, there are several Actos-related cases going on right now, including California, Nevada, and Maryland. And in all three of those, the judge actually overruled the jury's verdict as far as damages. Now, there were appeals in California and Nevada. Those are ongoing. These aren't class action lawsuits, though, so there is a little bit of a difference there. It's not going away anytime soon, though. This is going to continue to be in the news. It's obviously a negative headline. You never want to see your company's name with a drug that has potentially a cancer risk and multi-billion-dollar lawsuits. But if you believe in these companies, if you like what they're developing, I think Eli Lilly in particular has an interesting pipeline. This could be a chance to pick up shares a little cheaper.
That's a good point.
All right, so let's move on to our next story, which also features Eli Lilly, and that pipeline transition is actually a really good one, because they, along with big pharma Pfizer, announced some exciting news for breast cancer treatments. Now, these are drugs that are in early to mid-stage development, but breast cancer, it's a huge indication. There really aren't a whole lot of good treatments for it either. It's the most common form of cancer in women. It kills 40,000 per year. Michael, tell us a little about these drugs.
Right. So on the one hand, we've got Pfizer's palbociclib, which these are both, by the way, CDK4/6 inhibitors. So basically, they shut down this pathway that helps tumor cells divide and grow, and that's kind of how they work.
It's a pretty exciting new class of drug.
Well, exactly, in part because it deals with HER2 negative. Breast cancer, unlike Herceptin, for example, is really indicated for sort of the HER2 positive protein. So this is an excellent market opportunity because we're looking at about 60% of advanced breast cancers, this HER2 negative. For palbociclib, progression-free survival median was about 20.2 months for patients taking it plus letrozole, also known as Femara, compared to 10.2 months for those only receiving Femara.
Yes. 10-month difference is huge.
100%. That's huge. Now, not enough events have yet occurred for overall survival to be computed, but that's still ongoing.
Yep.
So,
and it was positive. It's about a benefit right now of 4.2 months.
Right. So 37.5 versus 33.5.
Yeah, but it's not, as you said, statistically significant yet.
Right. And Pfizer's hoping to do an accelerated approval with the FDA. That's in kind of the talk, and just no news yet, so wait and hope, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're going to watch closely. You can do it with phase 2 with strong data where there isn't a great treatment option. The FDA is certainly willing to rush things to market. Obviously, the company still has to continue doing post-marketing trials.
Right.
But the question is, I think in this case, trial size was 165 people. That's not that large. So the FDA may want actually more information on that. I do think if it does get approved, this is a drug I've been watching really closely for Pfizer. I think it's a drug that has peak sales potential in the $5 billion range. I think it's an incredibly important drug for Pfizer. So seeing strong results like this is exactly what investors should hope for. I think early approval, it's not off the table. I think Pfizer, they said they were going to discuss the FDA and the path forward. Pfizer's pretty good at this drug development thing, so I have some confidence in them. The secret play here, though, is Amgen, because Pfizer actually has to give royalties to Amgen. Pfizer had a deal with Onyx, who Amgen acquired for really a host of other drugs, but they got this nice little palbociclib kicker, so there should be a nice little royalty stream actually going into into Amgen. Lilly's drug, abemaciclib, as you said, aided 61% of patients. It was a phase 1 trial, 132 people, which is good size for phase 1.
Right.
That's definitely one to watch as well. Further back in development, but we don't know how the two compare. So as far as overall survival, progression-free survival, there'll be plenty of room in this market for Eli Lilly. Even if the drug isn't quite as good as Pfizer's, but it's way too early to say who's going to be the top dog here. It's just really exciting that these drugs are moving along pretty smoothly through development.
Right. Well, and especially for Lilly, that phase 1 I think had 5 different types of tumors. Only a subset was the breast cancer. So I mean, I think we'll be seeing a lot more. The data they reported said, we had progression-free survival of about 9.1 months so far. Still a lot more to do with that trial, and a lot more to do with that drug. But this is early news, but it's good news.
It's good news, and it's another stock or another drug in Lilly's development pipeline that you can circle and be like, okay, this is one that I definitely need to follow.
Especially given that these patients have been heavily pretreated.
Yes.
I mean, so that's really I think good news that this could be a very effective drug.
All right. I think it's good news as well. So let's move on to approved drugs from experimental drugs. And there's really no drug that's making, although actually there's another one we're going to get to in our final segment. But really the number one drug making headlines right now is Gilead's Sovaldi. This is the groundbreaking hepatitis C, essentially cure. It's got cure rates in the 90% percentile. The problem is the price of it. It costs $1,000 per day, which totals up to $84,000 per round of treatment. Gilead says this drug is significantly better than all the other drugs, and the cost of not curing people is significantly worse over time. That's true. That's both true. But it looks like the price may be breaking the back of the system. Express Scripts, we've had Congress complain, we've had all sorts of people complain, but they're really not going to be able to bend Gilead to their will. Express Scripts does have some weight, and I think this quote from their chief medical officer really summed it up. He said, "What they have done with this particular drug will break the country." Now, Michael, will Sovaldi break the country?
Well,
it's a big question.
I think maybe he overstated his case just a little bit, right? So, I mean, Express Scripts is trying to get this coalition together to basically say the moment something else comes on the market, Bristol Myers or AbbVie are sort of the two nearest competitors. Once something else comes on the market, we're going to all commit to not take Sovaldi anymore unless they change the price, which would be a pretty aggressive move. But considering that we're seeing pretty similar cure rates, then perhaps it makes sense. I don't think it's going to break the country. Let me just say that. But leaving aside the ethics of it, I think from an investment standpoint, it is not good to have your company be in the news negatively, constantly. For your profiteering, and especially when, on the other hand, they're giving the drug to Egypt for $300 for 28 days. And recently they've started doing some international stuff with some Indian companies. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's sort of when doing good goes wrong. Right, because here they are, Egypt's a country with a huge hepatitis C problem, and they're trying to help a global population, but it just makes here at home what you're charging look even more egregious.
Right. Well, and they've just started doing some work with perhaps some Indian generic firms to go ahead and try and get it out to about 60 other developing countries. And the prices we're hearing are something like $2,000 for 24 weeks of treatment in India, things like that. I'd watch Mylan's Indian subsidiary, in particular, since they already have an agreement with Sovaldi to market some of their HIV drugs. But yeah, it does not look good. I think that ultimately somebody else is going to compete hard on price, or Sovaldi's going to go ahead and drop. So.
Well, I think the interesting thing is it's certainly a window for AbbVie, which is further along than Bristol in development. So it's certainly a window for them to compete on price and really steal some of that market share from Gilead, especially if Gilead engenders a lot of ill will between now and when there's a competing treatment. 2 questions. One, what if AbbVie doesn't really undercut Gilead in price? Where does that put Express Scripts and everyone else? And 2, it'll be interesting to see because Gilead's drug is 1 pill a day, AbbVie's is 6, so there's a much bigger dosing convenience with Gilead. I actually think this is partially a push against Gilead increasing the price even more when they add lead-iposphere for genotype 1, which is the most common genotype here. Would be all oral interferon-free for genotype 1. I think that the best they're going to do is basically say, all right, you cure 2 and 3 for $84,000. Now we want lead-iposphere included for free, so we can cure genotype 1 for $84,000. I think that's the best they're going to get with Gilead. We'll see if Gilead bends. We'll also see what AbbVie does. I mean, do they actually make some sort of backroom deal to cut a lower price, or do they just price it near Gilead and let Express Scripts and everyone else, complain about how expensive these treatments are?
Right.
But it's definitely something exciting to watch because, I mean, Sovaldi's on pace for $5 billion in first-year sales. Peak sales estimates are $7-8 billion. So if those sales vanish because there is a mutually agreed-upon blockade, that could be bad for the stock. So it's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
And also one to watch is probably, as I teased earlier, the other drug making significant headlines. They also have politicians up in a furor a bit, which is Zogenix's Zohydro, which is kind of a super painkiller. And there's been a lot of concerns about opiate abuse. It's not abuse resistant, and most new opiate products have been abuse resistant. And actually, the governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick, is doing something about it. He's saying, we don't care that the drug is FDA approved. You can't sell it in Massachusetts.
Right. So yeah, he signed an executive order saying that doctors could neither prescribe it nor dispense it. And naturally, perhaps, Zogenix is responding by suing to prevent his executive order from going into effect. This has been a really, really contentious drug, right? On the one hand, you had the FDA advisory committee voting against it pretty overwhelmingly. And then the FDA said, well, we're going to go ahead and approve it.
It's one of the few times I've ever seen that happen.
Right. Well, and then you had 28 attorneys general write a letter saying, please reconsider. And the FDA said, no.
Members of Congress got involved.
Oh, absolutely. And so, I mean, it's this complicated thing because on the one hand, right, prescription opioid abuse is a problem, right?
Yes.
So that's something we definitely want to guard against.
Problem.
At the same time, chronic pain is a huge problem. And so I'm very divided on this personally.
Yeah, it's tough. Zogenix drug definitely does what it's supposed to do, and it does it well. And that's why the FDA said, I'm sorry, it hit the checkpoints. We're not pulling it off the market. You know, they're giving doctors the chance to prescribe it responsibly. There is an abuse concern here. And I think if there, is a good abuse-resistant alternative, that could put Zogenix at risk. I believe there's one in development, so that's something investors need to watch. But Zogenix shares are down 36% in the last month. So I think at a certain point you do wonder, is this getting to be a bad news buy situation? They're clearly going to have a challenging and potentially troubled launch, but investors may want to actually watch sort of first quarter and the conference call and see what the results look like, because if they are finding traction because it's an efficacious drug, no one's arguing the drug doesn't work, it could be a kind of a bad news buy given all the negativity that's surrounded the stock. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, and I think a lot will depend on that run rate, but it's potentially very profitable for the company, so we'll definitely keep an eye on it.
Yep, and stay tuned to Fool.com for more market checkups and all your other healthcare news as well. For Michael Douglas, I'm David Williamson. Thanks for watching, and Fool on.